I think we do have, there's a lot of clean energy that we can look at, including, people are afraid of nuclear power, but including nuclear power. Nuclear power is the cleanest energy on the planet. It is. It's the cleanest energy. There's no argument about it.
That's not the issue. You're crippling 100 generations with your poison.
What poison?
The poison from the nuclear waste. We're going to leave that for 100 generations before it goes down.
These things are like a golf ball size of uranium.
And they're sitting all over the world and nobody knows what to do with them.
Yeah. Well,
nature has a nuclear plant, and she built it 93 million miles away. Maybe nature's got something working for it.
Well, the problem with solar energy right now, it's great if you can use solar energy, but the cost and the materials that go into building the solar panels often outweighs what you're going to get initially with the solar energy. So you have to look at it as a give and take. And right now we're beholden to a part of the world that is not our friend for our energy. We have energy needs, and we have to meet those needs. So we have to find a way that's going to make sense for everybody to meet those needs. And it doesn't.
We need to think about future generations.
Absolutely.
Do you support or oppose No Child Left Behind?
Yeah, of course, who wouldn't support not leaving a child behind? But look at, I know it's not what it is. It's a nice catchy term for putting money into faith-based organizations that are taking care of kids. I don't know that I really have an opinion on it yet. I mean, people can educate their kids how they want to educate their kids. I think that America is falling behind in certain areas like math and science. Exactly. And as long as we can, this is why we have people that come over from India and bright people from Korea and from Japan, and they get jobs in Silicon Valley because they have great training in science and math. And I think we need to concentrate on those subjects. So whether that's provided by a faith-based organization or whether that's provided by a public school, I think people need to meet the same standards. So as long as people are meeting the same standards, I don't really care.
I was wondering what you think about the general direction of American foreign policy.
Well, you look at, I think our main foreign policy right now has just been a policy of force. And if you're somewhere around 50 years old, you probably have spent half of your life being at war in this country. And I don't think, war is almost a new norm instead of peace. And I think that we need to change that mentality. So when you look at the world and you look at what we do, a lot of times our economic aid even funds both sides of local conflicts. We send a lot of money to a third of our total foreign aid goes to Israel and Egypt, and they're both enemies and they're fighting each other. And then we also send money to India and to Pakistan. India is a great friend of ours, and Pakistan is, by all accounts, is an enemy. And we're sending money to both sides. We send money to Pakistan because we need a way to get into Afghanistan. But if you pull your troops out and you're not there anymore in this forsaken place, then you don't need a way to get into Afghanistan anymore. So if you ask me what the biggest foreign policy challenge was, maybe the biggest threat to the U.S., I actually think it's probably Mexico. With the drug lords in Mexico, I think it's a very unstable country. I think that having a border that's unprotected, basically this border is unprotected. You can't go from France and walk across the border and walk into Germany. You're gonna be stopped. Why do we want to let people do that? Across the border here. So we have to have a protected border. We don't know who's coming across, and we have to concentrate on our neighbors that are in trouble.
I was trying to point out that most people that immigrate here live without documents, don't enter the country through that border. They go with tourist visas and they don't go home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
But
can't build a wall and keep
no, I'm
them
not
out.
saying that. But I'm not saying that all immigrants come to the country by walking
They don't
across
all
the
come
border.
to Mexico either.
No, but you can go through Mexico from some other country that might not be a friend of ours, and you can get here. So it's because their admission standards
They're
are.
not. Well, the majority of them do not walk through the desert. It's a myth.
But some people who would do us harm would walk through the desert to get here, so they can't.
That's Canada too.
Yeah.
And that's 3,000 miles.
Right.
And the only reason why they're unprotected because they're literally white.
There you go, Buck. That's right,
They,
that's right.
I think Canada has different admission standards.
Oh, no,
No,
please. No, they don't.
It's not about the admissions. I mean, this is the argument, I'm sorry, sir. But this is the part about the immigration debate that just so annoys me, is that if we don't look at the racism that is inherent in the argument that we need a fence. Now, my daughter, my youngest daughter, who was born and raised here in California, now works in D.C. She just came from looking at Native American Indian reservations in Arizona. And one of them, half of the reservation is in the United States, and the other half of the reservation is on the Mexican side. Where would you put the border? Where would you put the wall? But we do a great disservice to people of color when we insult them by not owning our racism that is inherent in that argument. And to give you another example, most of the prime property in this country is owned by other countries, whether it's downtown Los Angeles, downtown New York, Manhattan. Most of those pieces of property are owned by other governments, people in other governments, whether it's Britain. Nobody complains about Britain owning anything. Nobody complained about all the people that immigrated here from Canada and had very successful careers, including in front of the camera as an entertainer. Nobody complained about that until brown people came. Nobody complained about foreign ownership of our country until Japan started to buy up parcels of stuff over here. We do have in our country, one of our greatest exports is racism, or call it colorism. Whatever you call it, there is that ingredient. And we need to stop being in denial about that.
But I don't think protecting your country has anything to do with being racist. I think that
That's where I disagree
so,
with you.
yeah.
You have to take a look at that. Yes, I'm all for protecting my country. That's why I don't want us to contract out who's doing the policing of our courts.
Right.
Yeah, let's protect our country, but let's own our shit too.
But if you had
we
a,
are racist
if you had
in
a,
this country, and our policies are racist. When we start bringing people over from the former Soviet Union, nobody complains about immigration. And I've talked to people that came over from there. They got walked through the immigration process. They came here to Los Angeles and they had an apartment waiting for them and a year's worth of money and food and blah, blah, blah. And yet we have people that are dark-skinned trying to trying to get here because they're being shot at.
So
But
here,
they are
let me just tell you this
dark-skinned,
first.
and we leave them out there in the ocean and let the vultures get them.
Let me
So
tell
we
you.
do
Hold
have
on.
that
Hold on a second. So I practice in Van Nuys. I have 75% of my patients are Latino. My wife is Latina. She's Chilean. My father-in-law lives with me. I'm very sensitive to these type of issues. Now, protecting your border. If you had a nice piece of property somewhere, and it was in a bad neighborhood, would you put a fence around it, or would you just leave it open and just let people walk on top of it? And so I'm saying you have to. It has nothing to do with racist. I'm saying let's protect it from people coming in who may be enemies of this country, who may be taking our resources. You know, we have immigrants that are here now that fell through the cracks, that you have to have an effective, compassionate policy about the people that are currently here. And you can't say, I can't tell you the number of people that I know that you probably do as well, who may have American kids, but they're both undocumented, or one's undocumented, the other one's undocumented, or the other one's documented, and you can't send one person back and then say, okay, what are you going to do? Make them a single parent, running a household? None of that stuff makes any sense. But it also doesn't make any sense not to control who comes through the border. You have to have ultimate control over who comes through the border.
Okay, first of all, this country was invaded by the Europeans to begin with. So if anybody needs to leave, I'm sorry. My ancestors and her ancestors came on the slave ship against our will because some Europeans didn't want to get off their butts and do the work themselves. So if anybody needs to talk about who needs to leave, I'm just saying. But the problem is, who are Europeans to say who stays here when they were the ones who were the true invaders to
Are you
begin with?
saying that the argument needs to have less of a Eurocentric focus?
I'm just saying, you know, if your ancestors don't look like Cochise or Sitting Bull, you really have no say to talk about it. And especially when there's some people that exploit these people trying to make a living because they don't want to do the work themselves.
Again.
How can, you know,
Just as
the problem, that's really the problem. I mean, they don't want to pay people a decent wage. It's always been like that since
I agree.
the beginning of the country.
It doesn't matter I don't think it matters whether you're legal or illegal, you should be paid minimum wage. Everybody should have to be paid minimum wage. But you take advantage of
Well,
these
you know,
people.
well, minimum wage in Denmark is almost $20 an hour.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing in Germany or Switzerland or any other European country.
I need to leave.
Not here. And we haven't had a raise in 10, 15 years? Why?
I'm more interested in the mega corporate welfare of subsidies. Can they somehow start a sliding scale that you get it for 5 years, and if your business doesn't fly in 5 years, then you're cut? You know, something along that line. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to certain welfare structures like that also.
Right.
But there's no reason for the big oil companies, or isn't Michelle Bachmann one of the biggest receivers of
Yeah,
subsidies?
There are so many companies that pay no taxes and actually get a subsidy. You know,
Yeah.
Exxon is one of them.
Yeah.
Verizon is another one. Boeing,
They don't need
GE. So that all these companies that are making billions and billions of dollars and paying no taxes and actually taking a subsidy. And that's one of the reasons why the tax code is so complex. It's because Congress people can reward certain people who are giving contributions, or industries who are giving them contributions, by writing something a little bit more complex into the tax code and giving them breaks. And that type of work has to stop. You know, we have to. These people, they're trying to feed off the backs of the middle class, who really don't have. So you have the certain percentage of the population that doesn't pay any taxes at all. That makes below $25,000 per household. Then you have those people that make between $25,000 and $90,000 per household, and they pay a majority of the taxes in the country.
Income taxes.
Income taxes, yeah. But we're also talking about corporate income tax, which corporate income tax in the United States is supposed to be 24%, and there are many corporations that are paying much less than 24%. Now, it makes sense to have something even lower across the board with no cuts with no breaks for anybody. That type of thing is acceptable.
Yes, I'd like to come back to for a second to the immigration issue. One of the things that I've always been very bothered about is when I hear stories of people who were brought to this country as a young child, like someone was brought here maybe 3 or 4 years old, 10 years old, something like that. And they are brought up here, they go to school here, they go to college here, and then they find out later in life, maybe they even go to the service, they serve to protect our country, and then maybe they get a little snare with the law or some misdemeanor, and they're ready to throw them out, to deport them. And I think that's wrong. I think when someone's brought here as a young child and they didn't necessarily, come here by their own volition and they're just a victim, and we're throwing some of those people out. And every time I read one of those cases, my blood just boils.
Yeah, they're heartbreaking stories.
Yeah.
So I know somebody that works at my hospital. Her husband is undocumented. He got stopped for driving without. He's got stopped for doing something,
Yeah.
and then he's driving without a license. They impound his car in L.A. and his wife goes. It's in his wife's name. He obviously didn't have a license or insurance. His wife goes to get the car. They can't find it. They come back tomorrow. She goes back tomorrow. They can't find it. And they charge a certain number. They charge whatever, $150 a day or something to impound your car. They went on for an entire month before they finally found the car. And apparently this is some scheme that they were doing because what are they going to do? They're going to have to come up with $3,000. So you take a a population that's already disadvantaged, and you just put them in the cycle of poverty by taking advantage of them that way. That doesn't make any sense. And another person I know, same situation of yours, his aunt died in Mexico, and he couldn't go to Mexico because he'd never get back across the border. And so it's you look at things like the DREAM Act, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the DREAM Act goes far enough. And the DREAM Act, as it should have been bipartisan support for the DREAM Act, but it didn't even go far enough, and obviously it didn't pass this year.
Back to amputations and related disorders. Diabetes being one of the largest growing problems. What about nutritional efforts and also I don't know, maybe restrictions of sorts on non-nutritional items, or start taxing the heck out of sodas and sweets and stuff?
Oh, well, they've already been.
We have an unbelievable problem that we're going to be facing in 30 years from now. The rate of diabetes in the United States is going to double. Right now we have 26 million people with diabetes, and an additional 79 million more have pre-diabetes. That's a third of the total population in the country.
Wow.
Healthcare makes up 21% of the federal budget. Diabetes makes up a third of that. A third of that 21% is related to diabetes. And diabetes, so for the first time in history of the world, chronic diseases surpassed infectious diseases this year as the major cause of death. So people used to die of infectious diseases like flu or dengue fever or any of these other things. And now that we're doing such a good job of treating those things, but we're doing a bad job of keeping our bodies healthy, that these chronic diseases are surpassing infectious diseases as the leading cause of death. They're also very, very expensive diseases. These things cost so much money to treat, and at the end of life, they're really, really expensive. Most of about 50% of the total cost of your whole health care over your life is spent in the last year. So we have to look at educating people. I don't really like mandating what people can eat or that type of thing, but I think that maybe like you're suggesting something maybe similar to the cigarette tax, or maybe an alcohol tax, something like that.
Or the marijuana tax
Right.
we're going to have when we legalize it.
They're worried about doing a fast food tax because already fast food chains are having trouble with hiring. They don't want them to fire people. So there has to be a lot of things. Yeah, it's cheap. It's the cheapest type of food. That's why people are eating it, and it's also, they've studied, it's also addictive.
First time ever to get 2 calories for a penny. Ever in the history of humanity.
Yeah. So diabetes is not only a big problem on the healthcare side, it's a big problem on the finance side.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned the influence of lobbyists in Washington, and I heard a statistic recently, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I heard that about 25 or 30 years ago, there were maybe a few hundred lobbyists in Washington, and now there are thousands, if not tens of thousands. Buddy Roemer, former Republican governor of Louisiana, just entered the Republican race for the presidency. He's definitely a long shot, but he has come out saying that there's just systemic corruption and we need to do something about it. So what would you do?
Well, I think the reason why they hire ex-congressmen and ex-politicians as lobbyists is because of their influence. They pay them for their influence. They pay them a lot of money to go in there. They know the right people. And one of the first things you could do is prohibit. These people are supposed to go there and help your country run better. And when they get out and they go back there to just get you to spend more money, that's not doing you any good. And I think that the first thing that could happen is a ban on maybe not for a lifetime, but maybe a 10-year ban on being a lobbyist after you, or maybe an equivalent amount of time to what you spend in Congress. If you're in Congress for 6 years, maybe you can't be a lobbyist for 6 years. And that type of thing, I think, would go a long ways.